Didn't know what the reception would be. I kind of thought I'd be giving talks in San Francisco and Seattle and New York where homelessness is really terrible, because while you have a problem, it is nowhere near the scale of the problem that we have on the coast. And I joke that I'm a bit like a Charles Dickens character in the sense that I'm the ghost of Christmas to come, in the sense that I am coming from Seattle and I'm coming with a warning that if you don't pay attention to housing, you're going to have an issue in 10 years that you're not going to like, and it's going to be a heck of a lot harder to get out of it. Concerned citizens are walking around saying, we're spending all this money, the problem keeps getting worse, obviously what we're doing isn't working. And in the absence of a clear explanation for the crisis, people then latch on to whatever they see. And so we end up equating the visual evidence of homelessness on the street with its causes, rather than thinking about the structural deficit of housing that is fundamentally driving this crisis. And therefore, what I wanted to do in the book was to take information that we've known in the academic community for 20 years and really translate that for a general audience. We basically take all the conventional explanations for homelessness and really say, does this help us understand regional variation? And the answer to that question is either yes or no. If it doesn't, we cross it off and we move on. Next slide, please. This is serious mental illness. These are rates of homelessness compared to rates of mental illness. And what you'll see is there's literally no relationship. There are people experiencing mental illness, serious mental illness, in every state in the nation. And there are not disproportionate number of people experiencing mental illness in states with high rates of homelessness. Next slide, please. This is rates of substance use disorder. This is the exact same message as the prior slide. There are people with substance use disorders in every state in the nation. And there is some variation in that. And it bears zero relationship to rates of homelessness. So the point here is that the consequences of addiction are different in different places. And so the evidence is not there to say that this is fundamentally driven by drugs. Do drugs exacerbate this issue? No question about it. So what we're doing here is we're looking at rates of poverty, and we're seeing if rates of poverty, variations in rates of poverty, help us understand regional variation in rates of homelessness. So the bottom axis here would be the poverty rate. That's the percentage of people in this city or county that are below the federal poverty line. So the right side would be high poverty, left side would be low poverty. The y-axis, or the vertical axis, is the per capita rate of homelessness. Up top is high homelessness, bottom low homelessness. And each dot represents one of the cities or counties in our sample. There is a modest relationship here, but it's in the opposite direction of what we would intuitively expect. Where poverty is high, homelessness tends to be low, which causes people to kind of tilt their head a little bit. We know poverty causes homelessness, but when you plot it at the community level, higher poverty leads to lower homelessness. Highest poverty rate in the United States is Detroit, Michigan. Yet it has far lower rates of homelessness than very, very affluent cities like Seattle and San Francisco and Boston, the three most affluent cities in the United States. So homelessness thrives amidst affluence, not amidst poverty. The consequences of being poor in a rich city are far more severe than being poor in a city with more moderate incomes. So we can't blame poverty for this. Can't blame poverty for regional variation. And so the final category, the third chapter of mechanisms that we test, are housing market conditions. And as you may have guessed, this is where we actually start to see some relationship. When rents are high, homelessness is high. Dun, dun, dun. Okay? And what you'll see is way more statistical evidence here and explanatory power than anything else we test in the book. A related variable is vacancy rates. This is rental market vacancy rates. For those of you who don't think about vacancy rates, 5% is kind of the neutral point on rental market vacancy rates. That would be a market that is in equilibrium between supply and demand of rental housing. When you get below 5% vacancy rates, urban economists would suggest that you have a deficit of rental housing. You don't have enough. Numbers above 5 would suggest that you have sufficient rental housing. And so what you see here is that when vacancy rates get low, below 5%, you'll see that rates of homelessness go up quite a bit. So when people get angry with me and they'll say, there's a drug problem, Greg, I'll say, they said, I don't buy this. I said, well, give me an example of an expensive city with really low vacancy rates that doesn't have a homelessness problem. And again, blank stare. And I said, I'll save you the time, there isn't one. If you just give me the rents and vacancy rates in a city, I can tell you with a fairly high degree of confidence if you're going to have a real problem with homelessness. Rents always emerge as a major driver of rates of homelessness at the community level. Our response as a nation has been insufficient to the problem of homelessness, and therefore it persists and has grown. We also have constructed a homeless response system which is life-saving. I think we have a moral obligation to do that, but we're fooling ourselves if we think that that is going to end homelessness. It's not. It is a response to the crisis. It is not an intervention meant to end it. Therefore, we need capital investments for housing. And we've not done that at scale, either at the Fed, state, or local level anywhere in the United States. Next slide, please. So a little context here. As you can see, median rents in Indianapolis have grown pretty substantially. I ran the math on the plane yesterday. I think it's about 35–40%. Vacancy rates have gone from 11% to 4.7%. As you remember, 5% is a tipping point for vacancy rates. So when we were doing this book, we didn't have 2022 data. We went through 2019. Indianapolis had the lowest per capita rate of homelessness among our cities in our sample. And part of the reason was you had a relatively accommodating housing market. That is a recipe for low rates of homelessness. That is no longer the case. Now, this doesn't flip on a dime, and so you're not going to be Seattle tomorrow, but the point is that you are now in the territory where the red lights start flashing. And if you continue to see rent growth and vacancy rates at this level, you will start to have a housing crisis. It won't immediately be Los Angeles, but the point is that you do not have the luxury that you did 5 years ago, because this is no longer just a Seattle, San Francisco, and New York issue. This is a Cedar Rapids issue, an Indiana, a Muncie issue.